Hey, Ken.
Hi.
Hey. And hey to all you as well, because you know what? Award season is coming your way.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we got everybody talking about that shit. All the famous people coming out the woodwork to clap at themselves. And, you know, the Golden Globes have literally just been passed. And somebody sent me a gif. It was of Leonardo DeCaprio. He was announced that I believe he'd won an award, or he'd just been nominated for something. And he was applauding because he still didn't realise that he had been, you know, nominated / won something for the first time in his life in a long time. So,
yeah,
you know, it's
seriously.
like, oh, Leo, it's, you know, first time it happens and you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't blame the guy because ever since his depiction in Titanic, the Academy has been incredibly wary about giving him anything.
The Academy has been wary of giving anyone, you know, anything that isn't within their little clique, which is our discussion today, dear viewers.
Yes, it is. Every time the award season comes around, I mean, you always hear, like, how people are buzzing about what movies and actors and actresses and what have you are going to take a prize. But the problem is that what a lot of people don't realize is that the award ceremony these days has lost a lot of impact that it actually had, you know, maybe a couple decades ago. It lost a lot of its repeatability.
Yeah, this is definitely a situation that you could effectively call an episode of Penn and Teller's bullshit, and I wish they'd done one. And they, funnily enough, they actually touched upon it in an episode they called The Best, when they talked about the awards that they got and then how they lost a Queer Eye for the Straight Guy later on. The point being that awards, as you said, in terms of their impact, are by and large bullshit, and there's a lot of information to get through. So the first thing to talk about is the fact that the Oscars are the big one, you know, the one that we put the most emphasis upon.
Yeah.
As if that, you know, they represent a value that we can put on films. You know, forgetting the fact that this is supposed to be a completely subjective medium. You like what you like, and, you know, it's not possible that everyone can agree to the same standard as everyone else.
No,
And,
Will, don't
yeah.
you know? Don't you know? We all have to like the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
You silly goose.
Yeah, well, it's better than being a duck, Ken. It's better than being a duck. So, and cross that reference off.
No, but seriously, I mean, with people liking so many different movies, it's kind of insulting to see that. Well, I mean, first of all, several genres have been effectively crossed off the list for decades now, like horror and comedy. Even though both of those genres have produced notable cinematic achievements. I mean, Bride of Frankenstein is one of the best horror films of all time, and it's a really touching story. And Charlie Chaplin's works, the Marx Brothers' works, I mean, there have been notable contributions to comedy, and sadly, that's a field that's been largely unrecognized in the cinematic world.
Yes, well, the thing about the Oscars is that you have to remember, it's about a bunch of people who, you know, get together and sort of self-appointed, really. I mean, who puts the people of the Academy in power? Well, it's the people of Hollywood. So it's already a kind of circle jerk from the get-go. It hasn't been going all that long, even though cinema has, you know, sort of had a history that by and large isn't that long. The Oscars lifeline is even shorter, having been going for about 82, 83 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's already an institution that you kind of have to take with a grain of salt. It's something that's kind of only there for people to sort of, you know, give recognition to what they believe are noteworthy works amongst that circle, which already makes it a really testy subject to begin with, you know.
And that's a shame. That's a real shame. Exactly.
Somebody put it best as it's one of those things where when something we like wins, we all go, oh, it's great that won. It was always deserving of winning it, and we're really glad it did it. And when something we like loses, we all say, well, the Oscars are a waste of time, and who even gives a shit? The truth is that it does lie somewhere in between. It's no secret that the Oscars play favourites with the audience, not the audience, the cartel that they have built up.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Monday night that can only explain why Brave won the award last year.
Yeah.
Over much more deserving entries.
I'd like to talk about animation and the Oscars a little bit later, but you're absolutely right. That is a big part of it. And Monday Matt was talking about how one of the ways in which the Oscars play favourites is snubbery, and the fact that when James Cameron's Avatar was up against The Hurt Locker, And I'd like to stress that I'm not really talking about the quality of films. This isn't really what the discussion is about. It's about the semantics of how the game is played in Hollywood land. He was talking about how The Hurt Locker mostly got the Oscar because they were deliberately snubbing James Cameron because she was the director who did The Hurt Locker was his ex-wife.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a game of playing favorites. They were on the side of his ex-wife and they did not want to give the Oscar to the James Cameron movie.
Yeah, I actually remember, like, I was in film school around that time where, that Oscar season was a-buzzing. And, people were talking about, like, oh, The Hurt Locker. It set the landmark for being, like, the first female director ever to win something.
Yes.
And, not only that, but people in the cinema department were all like, oh, Avatar doesn't deserve any awards. It's just eye candy with no artistic flair.
Yeah, that's already the problem. And it's one of the problems that I have concerning animation in the Oscars. We're very good at giving out awards for what we consider to be standards of art and achievement, don't you know, and all the great things that we show within torturing ourselves and the human condition, etc., etc., etc. But we don't really give awards properly, considering technique, considering if a film really does have artistic merit in something other than perhaps the script and the ideas. Because don't get me wrong, I agree that all that stuff is relevant and part of what makes movies fantastic.
Oh, totally.
But I think that it's really silly that we have one animation category, considering that we have animation all over films now. The fact that Gravity, by and large, is an animated film.
It really is. Or Life of Pi.
Yes, exactly, Life of Pi. And these things don't get put in the category in the same way as the kids' animation does. Pixar always turns up in it. Hasn't this year, I might add, which I think is really annoying, because this year they actually made a really groundbreaking film for kids. It's just... Monsters University, the film that actually tells kids that you don't have to go to university to do what you want to do, which I think...
that's right.
Yeah, and my friend Rufus of Crimson Midgets made a fantastic point when he said that, have you noticed how most of the monsters who go to that university don't turn up as members of Monsters, Inc. in the following film? And I was like, shit, that's really tragic.
Yeah.
But totally true.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, that movie actually reflects a life lesson pretty well. Yeah. I mean, just as another example, I mean, it's really weird that it parallels with an animation movie again. But when I saw Wreck-It Ralph, like, I actually, near the end, I actually got a little emotional because, like, it was actually showing sacrifice that, just because... it has the old tried and true, don't judge a book by its cover, but, it sort of made it relevant in a contemporary way with a video game villain, an emerging media as that is.
But also artistically, it represented video games in a way that was creative, that utilized the medium of animation, it didn't just... in some ways, yes, it was very much another CGI film that had come out of the Hollywood machine, but... it was the way that they had utilized, these people were clearly a fan of video games, and you can see that in the way that they've animated and the way that they've created this world. The fact that in Wreck-It Ralph's world, you have characters who move, in a very jittery way because they're missing a lot of frames, much like the characters, did in those arcade games.
Oh yeah, totally.
Same for the design, the way that they recreated very faithfully, I thought, a kart racing game through Sugar Rush, and the way that they did, parodies of Metal Gear Solid, intertwined with elements of Call of Duty for Heroes Duty. Stuff like that. And the thing is, Frozen I know Frozen is probably going to win an Oscar this year, because Frozen is winning on the basis of its representation, in the same way that 12 Years a Slave is probably going to win on the basis of representation, because this is the snobbery aspect we're talking about here. It's not about technique, it's not about does it do something that is truly original and fresh, it's does it please a certain demographic of people.
I think it's more than snobbery in that respect. I mean, it's interesting you bring up 12 Years a Slave, especially, because I think what a lot of it is politics. Now,
yes, that's it. Politics is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, in my respect, when I was when we were talking about the Hurt Locker and about
Yeah.
how like the director was like the first female director ever to win the award, I'm not saying that shouldn't have happened. I mean, it's still a milestone in that respect, and that's awesome. But I feel that she kind of won it for the wrong reason.
Yes, definitely.
Politically speaking, getting back at Cameron, just like politically speaking, if 12 Years a Slave wins, it's the same reason that Driving Miss Daisy won,
Exactly.
or how Pixar has pretty much won the awards like every single year. It's playing it safe. They don't really want to cause controversy and play risks, because if they do that and if they get people pissed off in the Oscars, then, well, I mean, in my opinion, God forbid the Oscars actually become something worth talking about. But, I think that they're just too afraid to make any meaningful contributions to film, like give movies recognition that actually deserve it.
That is the problem, isn't it? It's a lot of self-projection, the politics of self-projection. It's the idea that people, 12 Years a Slave is going to get it. In a way, I'm not saying, again, this is not about the quality of the film, this is not about whether or not the film is any good, but it's very clear that it's, the fact that it's almost in every category, it's very much a film that's going to win because it's a black director portraying a subject matter that will be deemed sort of high concept, that will be deemed breaking new ground, etc. For that particular awards contender. Whether or not it completely achieves that, is another issue.
Yeah.
And it's just
Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, it's fine. I was only going to go on to say that, for me, I think animation is actually a really good analogy for how the Oscars, for example, are broken, because all the films that are up there on the animation category this year are films that are pretty much the films that came out for kids this year. There's obviously some exceptions, there's, for all the low budget ones, but pretty much every major studio that brought out an animated film this year has got their film into the category. Now, nobody is talking about the fact that Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the second one, while not an amazing film, from its animation standpoint, is still one of the best looking CG films in motion that exists at this moment. In the same way that Hotel Transylvania, while not a great film, had some of the best art design and movement seen in a CG film recently. Yeah, exactly. But nobody recognizes that at the Oscars. They're not interested in the actual art of animation. They are interested in they're interested in demographics, ideas, and playing favorites and making sure that the right people get represented.
Yeah.
And I think that's very bullshitty in the biggest possible sense. And the awards have always been this way. Right from the get-go.
And I mean, just to really drive that point home, let me give you a little quiz.
Yeah,
Let me quiz you. When you think of film school, when you think of a huge cinematic landmark, what movie do you think of?
I think of Citizen Kane.
Yeah. And Citizen Kane was featured in the 1942 Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
Did it win?
No.
It did not win.
No.
What did it lose to?
Go on.
No, I'm asking you, what did it lose to?
I have no idea what it lost to.
You want to know?
Yeah, go on.
How Green Was My Valley?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, that's not a terrible film, but to lose to win to Citizen Kane is something of a head scratcher.
It is, because
that is definitely playing favorites, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, it blows my mind because, and I think this is going to lead into a much bigger point. I think is that generally, when we go back to the topic of subjectivity, one of the biggest things that I think stands out is how films that weren't even that notably popular, or films that didn't even win something, end up having a much bigger legacy than those that did.
Yes, absolutely. Again, time will tell with a lot of these things.
Yeah, so I mean, if we could just look at the established examples already, Citizen Kane lost at the Oscars, You know, which if we were to take the Oscars seriously and it wasn't just all politics,
Yes.
you know, it would be like, oh, Citizen Kane isn't anything special then. It's not the best picture. Why should we care about it? Well, every single film school across the country brings up Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
You
Most
have
film
to watch
enthusiasts in
Citizen
general.
Kane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's really crazy is this actually happened on a much smaller scale, I might add, when very recently, I think 2008, when both Gran Torino and The Dark Knight came out. And again, not talking about whether or not these films were the greatest films. We certainly don't know that now at all. I'm not talking about the quality of them. I'm talking very much about the fact that they got really big buzz. Gran Torino was considered sort of the pivotal work, the death of the cowboy character that Clint Eastwood had played for so long. It was a very big sort of event, and
oh, that's the one that was like him saying "Get off my lawn" or something like that.
Yeah, it's the racist one, and and it didn't show up at the awards. Same goes for The Dark Knight. I know that The Dark Knight did get snubbed at the Oscars though as a film.
Oh, it totally did. I mean, comedies and horror movies, you know, comic book movies, never make it. Never ever make it.
And Heath Ledger's performance, which was considered to be one of the greatest acting performances of that year, and you know, kind of slipped under the radar at the award ceremony.
He won Best Supporting Actor for The Dark Knight.
Right.
Yeah, he won that Oscar. But
Okay.
still, I mean, that's still him actually winning an award at the Oscars, despite the fact that he was in a comic book movie, which are criminally overlooked.
Oh, always. Again, it's the snobbery aspect. A comic book movie's probably never going to get an award. But it is worth noting that this year, Gravity, which is up for Best Picture and Best Director, I believe. I know that Framestore are certainly going to get a lot of awards for it, but it's one of the first sci-fi films to potentially win an Oscar. You know, but I wonder if this is mostly because of the involvement of George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, and the fact that Sandra Bullock is the leading lady. The fact that it is, you know, an Oscar-winning film, a sci-fi film that has a female lead in this day and age. Again, you do wonder how much of this is about the politics of representation within films.
Yeah, because...
in the same way that Frozen is right up there and probably going to get an award.
Yeah, I mean, like, keep in mind that moviegoers and gamers don't necessarily intersect, but I just want to bring up this interesting parallel just to make a point. But
yeah, sure.
Very much in the same way that the Oscars, you know, go about selecting films, you know, like how Driving Miss Daisy won the Oscar over Do the Right Thing, how the Hurt Locker's director won her Oscar and became the first woman to win an Oscar, how Sandra Bullock's performance in how Gravity might end up taking the award on the basis that, you know, it has a female protagonist. You know, don't get me wrong, these causes are excellent causes to you know, to advance. Like, I have a hard-on for social justice, but
but it's not a basis for sort of, you know, applying to, well, is this the best film? Because those are external forces, really. They're not sort of the about the context of the film itself.
Yeah, and the problem is like, this is sort of tackling those issues in the wrong way, very much how
it's a superficial thing.
She whose name shall not be named, Anita Sarkeesian, is tackling the issue of female representation in video games.
Yes.
Because of the fact that while in video games women are severely underrepresented, with being, I think, only 8% of the... I have a statistic somewhere. I think I'm actually going to post that statistic in a future article I'm going to publish, but needless to say that females are scarily underrepresented despite being more than half the population, and yet the way that Anita Sarkeesian and all of them are going about it is taking your favorite franchises, or taking just any franchise. For example, The Legend of Zelda, okay, a pretty innocuous franchise, or Mario, a pretty innocuous franchise, and saying that Link or Mario are patriarchal jerks, you know, who basically have to help the helpless woman because, you know, they're the only ones with power, and they're pointing they're basically identifying the symptoms of a sickness when the sickness exists, you know, i.e. in this example, the gaming industry, you know, having, I guess, an underrepresentation of female voices making their characters, or not so much an enlightenment happening there. Just like when we look at the Oscars and when we pick out these issues, how, you know, they're basically making the safe or quote-unquote edgy selections in their awards, you know, we're pointing to the symptoms of a bigger sickness, you know.
I mean, I have to say that I feel, with, you know, as you're saying, actually what it points out is how horribly women are being exploited in order to push other people's, not necessarily agendas, but to push other people's products. You know, it's like, we have a female lead, therefore our, you know, piece is better. It's sort of a weird logic where it's like, we automatically get a get out of jail free card because we include this particular demographic as our lead. Therefore, our film is great. You know, it's the same thing with 12 Years a Slave. Never mind the fact that it's, you know, it looks like another incredibly, you know, what do you call it? Sort of
long, pompous, drawn out,
high concept kind of film. Yeah, exactly like that. And it's like, well, but does the film itself actually hold up? Which is why I need to watch it as well.
Yeah.
You know, whereas Wolf of Wall Street, which I felt was, you know, incredibly well directed, incredibly, perhaps baggy, perhaps too long, but still well directed, well thought out, fantastically acted, will probably get snubbed in a number of areas because it is perceived as having misogynistic values or, you know, corrupt values, despite the fact that this is, you know, simply the true story that the subject of the film is attempting to tackle in a manner that the viewer can make up their own fucking mind on. You know,
something that you actually have to think about.
Yes, exactly. Yes. The other thing actually we should talk about is not just the politics of playing favourites and snobbery, but also the politics of bribery. I'd like to put forward something Mark Kermode was talking about concerning the awards. The fact that, for a start, I say bribery, it's sort of the best way to encompass the whole issue, and it's quite difficult to discuss, so bear with me. There's an issue that if you look at most British films that are entered into the Oscars and to, you know, other aspects, they are often co-produced or co-backed by American companies.
Oh, Weinstein,
just look at Philomena this year, which is, you know, it has Dame Judi Dench and Steve Coogan, but is also backed by what's the guy's name? Weinstein. Have I got that right? Weinstein, who has a huge amount of money invested in most of the pictures that end up on the Oscar list. Does that sound like a coincidence? You know what I mean? Like, or coincidence or conspiracy? That kind of. That kind of trail of thought.
I think not. Disclaimer.
Yes, exactly.
Disclaimer: Cheshire Studios is not actually saying the Weinstein Company is bribing anyone. Please don't sue.
Don't take our tiny asses and kick them into oblivion. You know? Not that we were planning on, I guess, heading into Hollywood anytime soon anyway, but, you know, our proverbial careers, I suppose, have been burnt at this moment already. But basically, you look at the films that have scored big at the Oscars from Britain, for example, and the two sort of defining factors are that they are either co-produced by the Weinstein Company or they are about the British royalty or British heritage in some form or another. So Shakespeare in Love gets awards, Oscars especially, King's Speech, what was it? The Queen.
You know, you're right. Or the Iron Lady.
Yeah.
Was that one?
Yeah, the Iron Lady. The Iron Lady is a very good example of another one that does that. You know, and it's sort of, you know, very highly considered actresses, highly considered actors, you know, who do, you know, dramas that are about a certain, you know, sort of aspect of British tourism. And they get through on the film board. They get through in the Academy Awards, and they kind of sweep the Oscars. And you know, it kind of says a lot about when there are hundreds of other films coming out of the British, you know, film industry, which aren't necessarily getting the same kind of recognition at all. And But then at the same time, it's all kind of about distribution as well, isn't it? It's about who gets the money and who gets what, because otherwise you have to remember that we get films such as Sex Lives of the Potato Men and Run for Your Wife.
What?
So, these are terrible, 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 terrible British films that again kind of point out as to where the money is going.
Oh my god.
Well, Weinstein is putting in money into the royal sort of, tourism pieces. The rest of the money is going into absolute shit.
Yeah.
So, the Daddy Dyer's film, which is Run for Your Wife. So, it's really, really difficult to pin down exactly where the money goes, but you can sort of see a trend emerging now and then as the Oscars go on, which let you know more than you need to about whether or not to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
And one last thing I'd like to point out is something that I touched on a little bit earlier, because there definitely is like an overwhelming influence of like a select few at the Oscars, with the money trail and what have you, controlling a lot of the things. So the Oscars, I think the Oscars nowadays have become very sterile.
Yes.
Like there isn't really anything worth talking about.
The problem I've had is that the Oscars happen every year, and you know what? Good films don't always come out every year. There are good films, but the timeless films that really deserve awards, they don't always come out every single year. And there's a film I thought was pretty fantastic, The Way Back, which came out this year. No recognition at the award ceremony. It's like, it's the subjective thing again. It's like you can't really say this is a great, masterpiece, groundbreaking, until it's been about 10 years, because then you'll see if it's affected the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think even more than that is how like the ceremonies don't really, like, in addition to making very politically safe choices, in addition to having the influence that affects like what movies make it in, etc., with the money trail, follow the money trail, people, is that generally speaking, just outside of the movies, you have the Oscars procedurally also becoming just a very, dull, safe event where, I think that if you discuss any contrary political views of the people organizing the event, or not even contrary views, but any political views that can get them in trouble, generally they try to avoid that stuff, which is why when somebody has a speech, like that fat guy, Michael Moore, when he was trying to talk politics, well, actually, he's a terrible example because everyone hates Michael Moore. Actually, a more prominent example would be the case of Sacheen Littlefeather.
Yes.
You've heard about this. Basically, she was accepting Marlon Brando's Oscar for The Godfather.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And basically, she had this script that was prepared, to basically talk about the misrepresentation of Native American people.
Yeah, because he went and fucking hijacked the whole thing.
Yeah, in the Oscars. And when Sacheen Littlefeather represented Brando in his boycott of the Best Actor Oscar for The Godfather, as a way of protesting the ongoing siege at Wounded Knee in Hollywood and television's misrepresentation of American Indians, they basically were like, no, you can't say anything about that here. Go away. But then she just gave a very short speech about it. You could hear some people applauding, others going, boo, what is she doing here? Grr.
Exactly.
It's as if, like, when people running the Oscars see, like, the very slightest twinge of controversy, they just whittle themselves and walk away.
Well, the problem I have is that I actually think it's bad on both accounts. I think it's bad that the Oscars weren't prepared for this kind of reaction, but I think it's also bad form of Brando to basically hijack the event for a cause that had nothing to do with what he was, because there was always going to be the reaction. It was always going to not be taken seriously. But Brando was very strange when it came to his I mean, he torched his own career effectively, which is a real shame because he was such a talented actor. But this is why he ended up doing fucking Superman. The guy really lost his way.
Yeah, I think another example then would also be Adrian Brody, where in his acceptance speech for something. I forget what he won the award for, but he basically also started giving like a speech about, you know, war and about hoping for peace and all that stuff, you know, and
all that
again,
jazz.
again, I think there were mixed reactions about that, but you know,
but again,
a lot
that's
of the times,
kind of just kind of shows you both those examples, the narcissism rampant, not only within those who give the awards, but those who accept the awards. So again, it's just, you know, the circle jerkery goes on. It's the circle jerkery of life. The
circle of okay, we get it. We get it.
Exactly. And you know, it's just it's cancerous in a way.
Yeah, it is. I think we've touched on a lot of the aspects of what makes the Academy Awards just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the narcissism, the possible monetary influences that people pile on the event, not to mention like how sterile it all is, the subjectivity of movies. I mean, we can really go on forever about how irrelevant the Academy Awards are in general, but I think something that we just need to remember is that even if the awards don't pick our favorite movie, you know, we can always just have our own preferences, not really care about what awards say about, you know, what should be the best film.
I think it's one of those things where it's like, I think it's good to have recognition of talents, recognition of you know, what can be done. The problem is that I mean, it's difficult to say. I really hate it when people say, "Oh, well, it's a bias thing." You know, you got to get unbiased people, because it's not possible in a creative industry to get people who are unbiased. However, I think it's worth getting a film board that, by and large, isn't influenced by the politics of Hollywood, and that's going to be impossible. The only way that could happen is if the Oscars fell apart tomorrow and they decide to come up with something else.
Oh. Of course, that could always turn out to be a disaster, too, like how the VGAs turned into the VGXs and what have you.
Oh, God, the VGX. That was priceless.
Yeah.
But again, it's a lack of standards. It's a lack of standards in the same way that the Oscars has no standards for, you know, for the portrayal of animated movies within their, you know, their segments.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So, alright, folks. If you want to see more golden content on CheshireCatStudios.com, then check out our podcasts and articles, and I hope you guys enjoyed this little debate, and we will see you guys next time on a... Oh. I'm getting a phone call, hold on.
They're coming for you, Ken.
Yep, it's the Weinstein Company, we're being sued.
Shit. Get in the back of the van, quick! Life is like a hurricane here in Hollywood.
Oh no.
Race cars, jets, and aeroplanes. People up to no good.
Okay.
They're gonna get you.